Hey everybody, I'm Ashleigh Banfield, and this is Drop Dead Serious. You and I both know Bryan Kohberger isn't exactly winning any popularity contests, not on the outside. He is one of America's most hated criminals, I think we can all agree, but he is definitely not loved on the inside either. And when I say inside, I mean Idaho's maximum security prison. If you're like me, and you want to see him suffer for every single day of his 60 some odd years behind bars, well, I may just have some good news for you. Things are not apparently going very well with his fellow inmates. And as one source told me, they had a plan for him even before he arrived. And I'm going to get to all of that, the details, the noise, the frustration, his complaints to the guards. All of that is coming in just a moment. But first, a quick thank you. A real big thank you for supporting this channel, because I could not do this without you. And I couldn't do it without my sponsors either, who really make this podcast possible, like Morgan & Morgan, a company that I've partnered with. If there is anything that Drop Dead Serious has proven to me, and maybe even to you, it's that the world is unpredictable. And having a really good lawyer is primo. And that's where Morgan & Morgan comes in. It's a firm with over 1,000 attorneys, and let me tell you that they win a lot of their cases. Just check out these statistics. In the past few months, Morgan & Morgan has secured a $9.3 million verdict for a car crash in Florida and a $5.6 million verdict for another car accident victim in Atlanta. Not to mention the $1.8 million in Kentucky after insurance offered a mere $5,000 in the case. Even if you think your case isn't worth millions, why not start a claim and just find out? At the very least, you should be fighting for what you deserve. Morgan & Morgan makes it really easy to do this. You can start a claim right from your phone, and it only takes 8 clicks. No kidding, 8 clicks. So if you're injured, start your claim and just take a peek. Just go to www.forthepeople.com/Banfield. That's forthepeople.com/Banfield. You can click the link below, or you can scan the QR code on the screen. And hey, share the love with your friends. It's cool. You can give them my code, www.forthepeople.com/Banfield. Now back to Bryan Kohberger and his personal hell that's developing behind bars in his maximum security prison. It turns out that the other inmates don't much care for Bryan Kohberger, and they're not afraid to make it crystal clear to him. The word is he cannot get a wink of sleep in his solitary cell because the other prisoners have decided to wage a nonstop 24-hour campaign of intense noise. That noise includes banging and shouting and taunting him through the air ducts. It's a campaign that is designed to scare the living hell out of Bryan Kohberger. And here's the thing. These aren't inmates mingling in a yard. These are men who are also in solitary, and yet they're still managing to get the job done. Something tells me the families of the 4 University of Idaho students that he slaughtered in cold blood might just take a tiny bit of satisfaction from this. Just a little good news in the middle of so much bad. And it didn't take long either for this to develop. Kohberger, or as the state calls him, inmate number 163214, hasn't been in the state's max security prison for 2 full weeks, and already he apparently hates it. Natch, it's prison. The quadruple murderer is locked up alone in J Block, supposedly for his own safety. It's called PC, folks, protective custody. 23 hours alone in a cell every day. Gets to shower every other day. If he's ever out of that cell, and it's, again, only 1 hour a day, he gets to be locked up with the belly chain and the leg shackles, and he gets to be walked to a cage. Sometimes the cage is outside, for a little sunshine, in a cage, or sometimes the cage is inside, in the Gen Pop area of that protective custody unit. So you're in a cage within the prison, or you're locked to a little desk, socially distanced from all the other inmates. So, yeah, what's to love? But officials can't protect him from everything. A source told NewsNation that his fellow hardcore offenders are going as far as they possibly can to make his life a living hell, totally miserable. We're told they actually are taking shifts, shouting through the vents all day and all night, keeping him from sleeping, keeping him from even having naps, keeping him from thinking, keeping him from finding even a moment of peace in his new hell. And apparently, it's really getting under his skin. We are told that he has asked the jail guards to help him do something about it, please. So, did they? Well, we did hear back from the Idaho Department of Corrections. Their public information officer talked to NewsNation about this, and here's what they told the network. Quote, "We are aware of Kohberger's complaints about what he considers taunting. Incarcerated individuals commonly communicate with each other in prison. Bryan Kohberger is housed alone in a cell, and IDOC security staff, that's Idaho Department of Corrections security staff, maintain a safe and orderly environment for all individuals in our custody," end quote. So in other words, shut the fuck up, Bryan Kohberger. People are yelling at you because they hate you. At least you're safe. So again, shut the fuck up. Now, hearing Bryan Kohberger complaining that he's being taunted, that's a conversation that I would have paid good money to overhear and even more to witness. But you know who else can't sleep, Bryan? The families of the 4 young kids that you butchered. Maybe even your own family, too, struggling to sleep, knowing what you did to them, knowing what you did to the kids, knowing what you did to your mother, your father, your sisters, knowing what you did to the name. Imagine them signing up for something and saying, "My name is Kohberger." That's what you did. Let's be honest. All of these petty annoyances, you could have avoided them. You could have gone to trial. You could have faced a jury. You could have been convicted. But instead, you took a plea. And now you've got decades ahead of you in a cell where you can't even hear yourself think. So how exactly are these inmates pulling it off? It's a really good question. And what does it say about the prison's ability or willingness or inability or resistance to stop the inmates from doing what they're doing? Because it really sounds a lot like the prison is just letting the prisoners sort it out for themselves. I want to dig into what's happening behind those prison walls, because solitary confinement doesn't mean silence. I talked to Chris McDonough on my NewsNation show, Banfield. Shout out, NewsNation, 10 p.m. Eastern. Chris is the director of the Cold Case Foundation. He's a retired homicide detective, and he's the co-host of The Interview Room on YouTube. Here's our conversation. Chris, good to have you on the show again. I don't know what it is about hearing news like that, but it just makes me feel good in a story where I have yet to feel even an ounce of good. How true is it? How bad is it?
Yeah, so Ashleigh, the good news is the inmates apparently were waiting for him. And when he got there, they are now making his life absolutely miserable. They're utilizing the vent system. They're kicking the doors. They're taunting him. And they're basically, torturing him through, using psychology. My goodness, he's complaining. And the guards at this point, the most they can do is write it down or tell him, hey, there's nothing we can do. You're not in physical harm.
I have so many more questions, and I'm going to ask them, but I do want to touch on that last little bit, physical harm, because as I understand it, he's in cages within his cage, meaning he's in a cell for 23 hours a day, and there's a slat for food. He gets out for an hour a day, but if he gets out, he goes into this big room in the middle, and there's usually a cage in the middle where he can be, or he can be handcuffed to one of those little desky type tables if there are other inmates who are nearby. How can people get close to his door? How could people get close to him and actually put him in physical danger, or can they?
Well, actually, there are about 32 inmates apparently in the J block currently. And within those 32 folks, they are the worst of the worst, outside of death row, of course. And he's in J block. So what that would be, that's called a special housing unit, right? An SHU. And it's really a prison within a prison. However, the disadvantage that he's at, there's not a whole bunch of room where they can start moving other inmates around. So what they want to do is keep him in protective custody right now until, he goes through the process of where do we fit this guy through the whole prison system for the rest of his life. And so he's meeting with doctors, he's going through, the systems of evaluation, and they're not going to put him into general population. But until that happens, the inmates have come up with a creative idea in harassing him to the point where it's basically driving him crazy.
So I have a question about that. How does it happen that they are all in collusion, almost creating a 24-hour schedule? Is that normal? Does this happen a lot, that prisoners will band together and say, let's get that one guy and let's all work together to do it?
I don't know if they necessarily band together outside of they knew he was coming. This was such a high-profile situation. They were aware that he was coming to, the IMAX prison up there in Kuna. And so they got together and said, okay, well, how do we harass this guy? And so my understanding is there's a couple of different ways of doing it. You can do it through the door, through the slot. The whole facility as a whole was built in 1989. So it's just one concrete echo chamber. And so they also can do it by kicking the doors. They even have folks that are called door warriors that just kick the doors to drive people crazy. And they can talk through the vents. And believe it or not, Ashleigh, one of the vents they can talk through is they remove the water out of the toilets, and they can actually talk through the toilet to another cell nearby. It's like this gigantic, acoustic chamber. But my understanding is they're using the vents currently.
So what if, Bryan Kohberger complains to the guards? We're hearing that he's been asking for help. Are they under any obligation to help him from bullying as long as his personal safety isn't being threatened?
Well, they're under obligation to basically protect him, right? And so, but in this particular situation, he's in an isolation situation. So those around him that can't get to him physically, so they've come up again a way of circumventing what the rules may be, right? Communication's a no-no within the prison, and inmates are extremely creative. They use a phishing system, for passing messages, from cell to cell by, tying toilet paper together with messages, and then they throw a little rope or a little line to the next cell, and that they call that phishing. And the notes are called kites, K-I-T-E-S. And so they're very creative on how they want to communicate. And apparently they set this up long before he got there, unaware of, the guards were unaware of it until it started happening.
So how long will it go on for? Because obviously, if you feel the way I do about this guy, you kind of want it never to end. If you're the families of these 4 kids, you want this to be much, much worse than just noise. How long is it likely that this sort of attack is going to continue?
Well, I think the only way they can prevent it from occurring, one, the inmates have already made their mind up. They don't see him as a welcomed guest in their house, and that's how they see it. This is their facility. It's controlled by obviously the state, and it's very well controlled, very protected, but he's already at a negative deficit with the inmates based on this information. And so as long as they feel they want it to go on, it will continue to occur. And the guards' responsibility, the corrections officers, is just make sure that he's not physically harmed. They can't control the psychological aspect of this.
Yeah. Oh, and then prison is so so much a psychological battle every day. So I'm going to ask our control room to re-rack some of that video from inside the unit that we were looking at that shows the single cells and then that center room. Those tables, Chris, in the front, and you'll get another shot in a second. They look like students' desks, and what we understand is that each one of them has a handcuff, and if you're going to sit at those desks, you have to sit at the desks handcuffed. What would the reason for that be? Like literally just to be able to get out of one of those lock cells, just to sit, almost socially distanced from another inmate? Or is it are these for classes? What are those desks for?
Well, most of, that's the center of the pod is what they call it. And there's, sometimes there's TV privileges and those types of things. But the one thing, to your point, Ashleigh, is to keep this idea that he is in maximum security. So that means 23 hours a day, he's going to be locked up. And I've been up to Pelican Bay, which is in Northern California, to visit prisoners, when back in the day. And these guys are escorted 23 hours a day when they're brought out of a cell for 1 hour. Meaning they're monitored for 23 hours. They're brought out for 1 hour. And they're put into these cages outside sometimes for exercise. They get 1 hour. But while they're doing it, they're escorted by 2 guards on either side, waist bracelets as well as ankle bracelets. And up in Pelican Bay in Northern California, they actually have a catwalk where they have a 3rd guard above this escort team. And so those tables right there tell you that person is not moving unless the authorities give them the permission to get up and move. And that's why they're handcuffed to those particular tables.
One last question, because I have this sort of running Hollywood movie in my head about what it's like for those 1 hour movements. When that door opens up and Bryan Kohberger is belly chained and gets escorted, what kind of noise happens then? Will the other inmates all know Kohberger's on the move, and will they react sort of in unison?
Oh, absolutely. That entire pod will light up with heckling, with taunting. I mean, they'll start kicking the doors. And if he's made any enemies in any way, shape, or form, even before getting there, sometimes that information flows rather rapidly before the inmate arrives. And that's one of the reasons they're keeping him segregated away from everybody currently.
No honor among thieves. You'd think that, in a maximum security lockdown, these guys would all be the worst of the worst, but I guess you can always be worse. And Bryan Kohberger certainly is. Chris McDonough, it's really great of you to help us get this information. Like I said, through Schadenfreude or whatever it is, I feel a lot better knowing that his misery just deepens daily. So keep the information coming. Thanks for that. I, for one, know that I said good riddance, and I hope I never hear from, Bryan Kohberger again. But there is sweet justice within the justice system to know that he hasn't found any comfort, that he hasn't found a friend, that he hasn't made this his new normal and figured out a way to be okay with it all. To hear that everybody in there, hardened criminals, many in there for murder themselves, have said, no, even we don't accept someone like this. It just feels better. It just feels better to know there's additional justice. I got to say, when Jeffrey Dahmer was murdered in prison, I felt okay. I thought, good riddance. You got a little comeuppance. You got what was coming to you. You got what you dished out, but not even half of it. I suppose I might feel the same way, except for I can't decide if it's worse to get the easy way out and die a quick and painful death or suffer a long 60 years of mental torment of being in a place like that. I'm really not sure. And I'm not in a place to pass that judgment anyway. That's for the victims' family members. And in any case, what's done is done. He's where he is, and he is protected from the other inmates physically. But you can't protect him through the vents. They can't protect him from the doors being banged on loud. They can't protect him from people hating him. And I have to tell you a little story. I never thought of it myself, but the person who did is awful damn clever. A victim's family member from another case said to me yesterday that she hopes that all of the victim's family members and friends band together and put money on the books of the inmates who surround Bryan Kohberger, just to encourage them to keep up the good work. I'll let you know if we hear about that. I'll let you know if it actually happens. But like I said, it's creative thinking from someone who's been cast into a club that she'd really rather not belong. She's now a family member of murdered victims, and she has her feelings about the murderer too. He happens to be locked up in that same place. I'm Ashleigh Banfield. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, the truth isn't just serious. It's drop dead serious.